Are you an optimist or a pessimist? And do you believe that we are born optimists and pessimists? This is the question I want to pose to you today, and then I want to share my answer under the context of the mindset of successful self-healers. So of course, this entire channel and everything I do is really focused around you taking full responsibility over your body and over your bones and your structure and your fascia and your soft tissue, and this thing called pain, right, and injury. And sometimes we talk about trauma and other things. And there's a lot here to work with and heal. And the idea of pessimism versus optimism, I think, is a huge part of the mindset that goes into this. And it's not something I've ever talked about on this channel, but it feels really important, and I've noticed it coming up quite a bit in the courses that I teach with my students. And they don't call themselves pessimists, but I start to notice pessimistic language, doubt, questioning the process, getting disappointed with results that are less than maybe they expected or wanted. And so it's something that we talk about. And I got to thinking recently about this idea of whether we are born optimists or born pessimists. Stefan and I had a great conversation about it. And my premise is that we are not born pessimists. I do not believe that any of us are born pessimists. I think that we are born optimists, all of us, 100% of us. I'm going to share why I think that in a moment. And if you've developed pessimism, I believe that that has become kind of a coping strategy or mechanism from emotional pain or perhaps trauma. And it might fall into the category of something I call a nervous system pattern of mitigating disappointment. So it's less painful to be pessimistic than it is to give your all to something, really, really go for it, and then be disappointed. And so that's kind of the theme that I see with people who tend to show up with a lot of pessimism. Now, it's not the only reason you might show up pessimistic. So I want to talk about these two things. And no matter which camp you're in, I hope that you take something away from this video in your journey of not just healing. Perhaps you're beyond healing at this point and you're looking to optimize. But no matter where you are in the process, you can use this information to hopefully accelerate whatever you're doing or find a little more self-forgiveness and grace for yourself in the process. Because I think we tend to get really hard on ourselves if we do judge ourselves as, say, pessimistic. So I'm not judging it. I think it's an interesting thing to dig into and then come to understand about ourselves, right? Like, why am I pessimistic? Why am I skeptical? Why am I doubting this process? This is interesting, maybe there's something here for me to learn about my own psychology. So first, let's start though with optimism. And maybe you're an optimist, and maybe you don't even need my help, and maybe you don't need to watch this video, but perhaps this will be confirmation for you that you're on the right track. The reason I think we are all born optimists is that if we were born pessimists, some of us, then some of us never would have learned to walk or talk or tie our shoes or do some of the basic human things. Basic. I'm not talking about anything astronomically genius. So let's take the example of learning to walk. If you've ever watched a baby, go through that process, then you know that, first they have to learn to roll over, then they learn to crawl, right? And even while they're crawling, they fall sometimes. Their muscles give out, they get tired. And then after a while, they learn to get up, right? And stand upright. And at that point, walking is in their very near future. And they're watching the adults around them. They see that walking is the human thing to do. It's the thing to grow into. And they try it. They try it, right? And what happens? Most of the time, they fall right away. right? They stumble, they fall, they don't have the proprioception yet, they don't have the muscle memory, they don't have walking on automation, they have to learn it. And if we were born pessimists, some babies would give up, but they don't. Have you ever seen a baby just give up, on walking? No. And guess what? I would venture to guess that very few parents, now maybe they're out there, but I would venture to guess that very few parents discourage their kids from learning to walk. And when the child falls, say something to them like, hey kid, you're probably never gonna learn to walk, so you might as well give up right now. So it's interesting to me that even an adult pessimist, when it comes to their own body and their own life, is not gonna usually project that onto their child. It's inconceivable, I think, for most of us to think about discouraging a child from learning to walk, right? I think it would go against human nature and every instinct we have. But for some reason, we learn pessimism, and then as adults, we use that on ourselves all the time, and we discourage ourselves, and we doubt, and we try, and we fall, and then we use falling as an excuse or a reason to not keep trying. And when it comes to healing your body and learning about your body so that you can actually heal it on your own, it's a steep learning curve. So I've never claimed this is easy. It's a lot to learn, especially, if you ever join a course of mine, like I believe that you deserve to know what your body is made of. So I teach a lot of anatomy and physiology, and then pain science and neuroscience. Like there's a lot here to learn. And then you have to actually go implement strategies, right, to maybe map your body and find the root cause of pain, and then activate muscles that weren't firing, or just get out of pain even is part of the process, right? Like eliminating acute pain. And if I were to develop some kind of strategy that worked for 100% of people 100% of the time, I'd be a millionaire. I'd be crazy famous. And it just doesn't work that way, in my opinion. And I've never claimed that it does. And, I've talked about my own healing journey. When I healed my knees, it was a years-long process that in the end ultimately only took 2 weeks. But it was years leading up to those 2 weeks. But even within those 2 weeks, in the summer of 2011, there were so many moments I could have given up, where almost all of the proof I had, to look at was against me. I could have looked at it like, this is clearly not working and I should give up, So I believe we learn pessimism as a coping mechanism, as a protection strategy to protect something within us that's even more core to who we are, and thus more vulnerable, and thus more worth protecting than whatever it is we're currently going after. So let's say, you're working on getting out of pain and you're starting to doubt the process. There's something here to look at. And I would guess, based on just all the people that I've worked with over the last, decade or so plus, since 2008, there is a common thread here in people who doubt. And typically it's a fear of disappointment. And somewhere in your life, you learned that disappointment was one of the most painful things to feel, right? So maybe someone promised you something, told you they were going to do something, and they never followed through, and you were disappointed. Maybe you started saying that to yourself at a certain age, like, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and then you don't follow through. And then that disappointment in yourself is really hurtful, painful, shameful, maybe, I don't know. But somewhere along the way, we learn pessimism as a protection strategy, in my opinion, and it can be unlearned. And the reason I like to point out that I do not believe we're born pessimists and optimists is because there are people out there promoting the idea that we are born one way or the other, and that's just kind of our orientation. Like, I've actually listened to quite a few podcasts with sports psychologists and personal development people and and other people like that. And it seems to be something we believe, that people are born pessimists or born optimists, and it's like a personality thing. And I totally disagree. Now, we have many different personality traits that are unique to us, but I do not believe that this is one of them. And so I think we can unlearn pessimism if it's present now, and we can learn and train ourselves to be optimistic. And optimism is 100% necessary to self-heal. And the reason I say that is you are going to encounter obstacles, and you're sometimes going to, get a little pain relief, let's say, and then the pain comes back. Or you relieve one pain and pain shows up in another part of your body. Or let's say, in my story, knee pain, but then let's say I eliminated my knee pain, but suddenly I developed back pain. Weird things can happen like that with your body. And if you're an optimist, you might look at that as like, wow, okay, that's really interesting. Like, I, got rid of my knee pain. It's gone. That's really cool. And suddenly there's back pain. Okay, that sucks, but I'm sure I can figure this out. If I figured my knee out, I can figure my back out, right? And so the optimist mindset is always going to be looking for opportunity. It's going to be seeing possibility instead of, with the pessimist seeing, basically seeing doubt and failure and the opposite of possibility. The optimist is going to see options and choices, and the pessimist is not going to see options. They're going to feel unfree. But typically, pessimists talk about doubting the method or doubting their body or doubting it's some external thing, right, that they're looking at. I don't know if this is right for me. I don't know if, maybe this isn't the right process. Maybe I am, not doing it right, but there's something they're looking at other than the fact that they're pessimistic. Like, I very rarely see someone go, I'm doubting this process and I'm finding it interesting that I'm doubting it. Like, I'm noticing that I'm pessimistic. So isn't that interesting, right? That hasn't actually ever happened. I'm usually the one that's pointing it out or asking them questions, but I think it's well worth digging into. And again, it falls into this category of something I call a nervous system pattern. And so if you're curious about nervous system patterns, then I encourage you to look it up, nervous system patterns, on the website, on the blog, or here on YouTube if you're watching it on YouTube, because I have other videos on nervous system patterns. And I'm, depending on when you land on this video, I may or may not have a video up on the specific pattern of mitigating disappointment, but it is something I plan to talk about. So I hope you find this interesting. If you do happen to catch yourself in a pessimistic mindset and you want to train optimism in its place, before you kind of pull the trigger or in your mind think that you should simply be able to replace pessimism with optimism, I first encourage you to dig in and make sense of your pessimism as a protection strategy first, so that hopefully, again, you can cultivate a little more grace for yourself and self-forgiveness and self-compassion and understand why it developed in the first place. And then you can start replacing it. So every time you notice yourself doubting, maybe try to replace that thought with either getting curious, asking an empowering question, like, what if I tried XYZ? Or what if it just hasn't worked yet? Or what if I haven't figured out the right thing for my body yet? Or what if it's going to take, 3 weeks instead of 1? What if I'm, my expectations are just a little too high, but, I believe I can achieve it in a longer time period. There are so many things we can ask ourselves, right? So dig in first, and then once you kind of make sense of why you've maybe been a pessimist up to now. Hopefully you're going to have that self-forgiveness and then replace those thoughts with something that represents optimism to you. And it's going to go a long way towards helping you on this healing journey. So I hope this was useful. I would love for you to share below if you've ever been told or thought that you are a born optimist or a born pessimist. Do you believe my theory that we're all born optimists? And it can be unlearned if you're an adult now and you notice that you're pretty pessimistic when it comes to healing. So I'd love for you to share that below if you're willing to be brave and talk about this publicly. Any takeaways or questions for me, please post them below as well. Thank you so much for watching this, and I will see you next time.